Hello and welcome everyone to Inside the Hobby, where each week we will be taking you inside the world of cards, collectibles, memorabilia, and other fun stuff. I'm your host, Scott Yeager, here for Golden Auctions, but it's not all about the auctions anymore. We're going to find out it's not just the items, it's also the personalities involved in this great hobby, and we're going to get their stories, we're going to get their knowledge, and we're going to give you a 360-degree view of the world of collecting. To do that, it won't just be me every week. I will be joined by a fantastic guest to share their story, how they got involved in the hobby, some of their likes, some of their passions, and we're going to have some fun along the way with them. Could not think of a better guest to join us right out the gate than Susan Lulgjuraj. She is the head of editorial here at Golden Auctions, and she is also affectionately known as Suze. Suze, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. I think you're a great first guest. I think you have such an interesting story, but why don't you start at the top? When you found your love of collecting, how old were you and what was it that drew you to it?
Like a lot of people, I got my start as a kid. I would see my older brother and my cousins trading baseball cards, but the problem is they wouldn't let me have any. Like, I didn't have anything to trade, so they were like, "No, these are my cards." So luckily enough, back then, like my mom would send me to the corner store to go buy milk or something, and back then with the change, you could actually like, "Hey, let me buy this pack for a quarter," and that's what I did. So I started collecting cards roughly around like 9, 10 years old. And, my thing, I love, I'm a big, huge Yankees fan. And I would just like flip through the packs looking for Yankee cards.
And when did this passion, this hobby turn into a career for you?
Back in 2007, I started a blog about trading cards. It was called A Cardboard Problem. And my friend and I, we created this blog because for me, it melded two passions of mine. One, collecting, and two, writing, because I was a sports journalist once upon a time. And we created this blog, and it kind of blew up. It was kind of silly for us because it was like, we're just two women who want to collect cards and write about like what's going on. But it turned out people wanted to read about that. And from there, I started doing freelance work for Beckett Media, writing different articles for them, and then actually became their football, basketball, and hockey editor of their national magazines. I was there for about 2 years, and then I actually ended up at Topps working there. My first job there was as an editor, where I got to actually pick the images that went on the cards. So like as you're ripping open a pack of cards, you're like, man, this is a cool image. Like some of them were the ones I got to pick, which was awesome. And then for the last 4 years I was there, I worked in the marketing team as their marketing communications manager. And now I'm at Golden.
Now, I have to ask about that job of picking the images that go on these cards. Some of these cards, as we're going to discuss, end up going for millions and millions of dollars, and the image is as important for some of these as anything. So what goes into picking one image over another for a card?
One of the sets that I worked on was Top Stadium Club, which, as people know, it's such a picture-heavy, sort of driven product. And when I worked on that, the thing I would do is like use Getty images. So you could scroll through like literally thousands of Getty images. But I looked for images that created an emotion, like something that was like, man, that's cool, or that's amazing, or like, I am a little emotional, so maybe it was like a sentimental moment. I had a little tear in my eye, but I wanted a picture that would get somebody to have sort of similar emotions. So for me, that's what was really important. Like, what kind of emotion is this image going to create?
When you talk about the jobs that you had beforehand, the writing, working for Beckett as well, talk about, how does that inspire you or inform you when you then go and work for a company like Topps? Do you feel as if you put more thought into things like that? Just hearing you talk about the emotion behind an image and things like that, do you feel like your sports journalism background sort of prepared you for this world of collecting, which I don't think the average person would think of a connection there, but I'm wondering if there is one.
Yeah, being a sports journalist, it's like you're supposed to be objective. Not gonna lie, I'm a huge Yankees fan. Even when I was covering sports, I'm still a big Yankees fan. But it allowed me to take a step back and sort of see a bigger picture, regardless of what the situation was. So even now, a lot of times, like something will happen in the hobby, and like there's like people with pitchforks or something, and people are upset. But for me, it has helped me take a step back and actually like see a bigger picture of a situation, and not get all riled up, all up in arms over something, or even like too excited because I mean, like I said, I'm able to see the bigger picture, but then also as a journalist, like you kind of learn history of things. So because of that, I see like the history of the hobby and like cycles the hobby has gone through, as opposed to just like, oh, this happened right now and being in the moment and like, and not being able to see like beyond like this sort of like tunnel vision.
Yeah, the hobby itself has become as competitive as the sports that the hobby is sort of depicting in a way. So having a grounded view of it, I'd imagine, can help you you have a better grasp on the ebbs and flows. Now you're here at Golden. Why don't you tell everybody what you do here?
Yeah, so I'm the head of editorial, where currently I'm running the team who writes all the descriptions for the different cards, which has actually been a lot of fun because even as somebody who has been a collector since I was a kid and who, understands the hobby and has a history, there are actually still like things I'm learning about, which is really cool. In the current auction, there's actually a 1952 mantle card, not a Topps or Bowman card, which is, for me, like I didn't even realize there was a third 1952 Mickey Mantle card, which is crazy to think about, but it's like a lesser known set, which is just, for me, I love learning new things. And for me, like to learn that there is this other card was like really cool. And you get to actually have fun within these like descriptions and convey that sort of stuff, because I can't be the only one. I would be shocked if I was like, oh, guess what? There's a new mantle card. And literally everybody's like, oh, you didn't know that. Like, come on. So I feel like even with this job, I'm learning more and more about cards every day.
You've had so many different vantage points of the hobby, Beckett, Topps, now here at Golden. I'd love to know what you've noticed trend-wise since you first got into it to now, as far as overall changes that have stood out to you.
Rookies are always going to dominate, so a rookie card is super, super important. That doesn't change. Whether you're collecting cards from the 30s, 40s, 50s to now, like the rookie cards are always going to be that one thing, regardless if they're autographed or short printed or, like I said, back from like vintage cards. Rookie cards have a sort of everlasting effect on people. It doesn't matter who or what or when, it's the rookie card sort of transcends all of it.
I want to know, as a female, as a woman who has such a lasting impact on this industry already, and I'm sure I'm not positive, but those cousins, those boy cousins who wouldn't trade cards with you, I'm sure they don't have as big of a hold on this industry as you do. Have you seen over the years more and more women get involved in the hobby professionally or just in general?
Oh, definitely. When I worked at Topps, like the marketing team, at the time, I'm just trying to think, 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe there was 4 or 5 of us, but there was 3 women on the marketing team, including the director of marketing is a woman. I think you see that at other companies as well, that like there's definitely more women within the hobby. I'm actually in part of a Facebook group called Women in Cards, where it's just women who get together to chat about trading cards and things that go on in the hobby, and talking about their mail days. And yeah, I went to a card show, and could you believe that they were like, hey, what does your husband like to collect? And you're like, no, I'm here for me. So we get to sort of commiserate about those kinds of situations too. But there's definitely more women joining the hobby because like they're sports fans. There's always women who are sports fans. And I think for me, and I feel this way for a lot of people, a different way to connect with your favorite team and player is by collecting their cards. So I think that people, have been trying to find different ways to connect, and cards have been able to do that for a lot of different women.
Well, men and women who are looking to connect this month are probably getting involved in Golden's June premium auction. I'd love to know, for something like this, we're in the thick of it now, talk about some of the roles you played in getting this thing off the ground and some of the work that you did for this auction that we're in the middle of right now.
Yeah, so like I said, it's a lot of writing. We have a team of more than a dozen people at this point writing different descriptions, because there are just so many different lots available, from vintage cards, modern cards, memorabilia. So we have to find like experts in all these different areas, including like, and not just within like vintage cards or modern cards, like people who know about baseball cards, people who know about soccer cards, people who know about football cards, basketball cards, because like modern basketball cards and vintage basketball cards, there's just such a difference. So there's been a lot of long nights of writing and editing different card descriptions. But it's, like I said, but for me, like, it's still fun, because like I said, I'm still learning, because I'm not an expert in all of those areas, but I'm learning about them. And it's really cool because we actually have somebody on staff who has a wonderful knowledge of vintage cards, and I love reading his descriptions of the lots because I always learn something new from them.
Well, as I mentioned, that auction going on right now, closing out next weekend, the 26th and 27th. Here's a look at the June premium auction.
The world is filled with hidden treasures. We scour the earth to find them by any measures. More than memorabilia, these are magical memories that have been tethered to the timelines of our minds. Rare jewels mined in rough times. Moments defined by storylines and will, fortitude and thrills, adversity that couldn't outskill the spirit of man. Now here we are. Welcome to the auction. The highest bidder raises their hand for the chance to claim a piece of history, a relic, an artifact, special editions. In fact, this is art. Whether they're rare or in mint condition, here collectors fight for their position. And if you're lucky enough to hold it, to own it, be clear this isn't merely a collectible. What you have in your possession is a gold moment.
So many amazing items in that auction that, of course, closes on the 26th and 27th. So it got us thinking, it got our juices flowing about, with so many awesome items out there, and I'm sure in your collection, Suze, if you were stranded on a desert island and you could only bring 3 cards with you, and I know that we gave you a little bit of a heads up here so you could plan accordingly, what 3 cards would you bring with you on that desert island?
Yeah, this was a tough question. I mean, I have a lot of cards. And I'm like, how about a box? Can I bring a whole box? But I had to narrow it down to 3. So the first card was a 2014 Topps update Derek Jeter Clear Parallel. And it's very specific. This is number 10 of 10. But the reason for this is, one, the picture was so let me start over. I'm a huge Derek Jeter fan. I mentioned Yankees, but I'm a huge Derek Jeter fan. And I have a lot of Derek Jeter cards. We're talking over 2,500 unique Derek Jeter cards. And this specific card is so special to me because this was the first card I got to pick the image of when I worked at Topps, of Derek Jeter. Not the first card, but of Derek Jeter. So I got to work on this All-Star, like this Topps Update All-Star, a sort of subset, and I picked this image. So it was special to me because this is my first Jeter card that I actually got to make. But this clear one specifically, you know, like we were talking about women before, it's like some women get like flowers, some women get chocolate for like Valentine's Day or anniversaries. My husband bought me this baseball card. And so it's important to me because this was a really special gift from him, because he knows how much I loved this set. And this is one of the most rare parallels of this card that you can get.
Go hubby, that's a great gift. Yeah, your Yankees fandom is widely known. It's in your social media handles. Some might think that I put this right here to kind of butter you up, this Jeter shot behind me. But, you know, I love the personal story there. The idea that it's not necessarily the most valuable Jeter card, but it's the one that you actually had a hand in putting together. Doesn't hurt that it's a 10 of 10, I'm sure. But, you know, as you mentioned, the hubby, you know, with the great present and grabbing it for you. What would be your second card out there on the desert island?
So when I was working at Topps, they did this really fun event for everybody when it was like Take Your Kid to Work Day. And, you know, it was a lot of kids and everybody brought their kids. And obviously I brought my son. He's now 4, but at the time I guess he was around 2-ish, because this was clearly pre-COVID. And so it was a custom card that we got to make at Topps of my little baby boy. There he is. and again, he's around 2, so it's like trying to tell him, like, stand there, smile, say cheese. He was not feeling it. So it's funny to me because I love this card because he's holding it and he looks like one of those like outtakes from like photo day that you would see on like cards over the years. So he's my baby boy. I love this card, and we actually we had a bunch of them, but we actually like keep one in a top loader, like in the living room.
Yeah, walk us through this. First of all, super jealous. Perks of the job. I mean, go and get a job at Topps solely for this. I have a 2-year-old son. I would love this. What is he holding there?
So it was just sort of so at photo day, when Topps and like other companies would go out to spring training and take pictures of like literally every single baseball player, but they would hold up the sign. So like I'm, Derek Jeter, let's just say. So I'm holding up a sign. So like you take the pictures and you go through. So like you'll always know who these players are because they're holding up their little sign, right? So in this case, he was holding up his sign of his name. This is Dean Good, and underneath it says, that's my name, Susan Lulgjuraj, so that they would first take the picture of this and then the rest of the photo shoot, so then they would know, like, okay, who's supposed to be getting these cards when they came back from, like, the printer. So he's holding up his little name.
Adorable. And as I said, I mean, I think, perks of the job, working at Topps, you now have a way to work a photo of your son onto the desert island with you. A lot of people wouldn't be able to do that. They'd probably have to pick the baseball player that looks the most like their son or something like that. But very cool. What about the third card you got for us?
So the third card is my favorite TV show ever, is Supernatural. I like more than sports. I love Supernatural, and I got this autographed card of Jensen Ackles, who was one of the lead characters on the show. This card is kind of old. I forget what year exactly it's from, but it's probably about 10-ish years old because this company, Inkworks, is not even around anymore. And, again, it was my favorite TV show. If I was on a desert island and they said you could only bring one TV series with you, it would be Supernatural. So at least this is a way for me to sort of, all right, like, okay, I'm bored, I'm on this desert island. Oh, my favorite TV show is Supernatural, and I get to reminisce about the show with myself because I'm on a desert island.
I noticed there the name of his character also Dean.
You picked up on that?
I did. I mean, we gave you 3 cards. 2 of them are Deans. That's a stat. 2 out of every 3 cards on your island are Dean cards. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, the story is, though, I'll say this: he's not specifically named after him. So my husband's name is Dan, and his last name is Good. My husband's Dan Good, and in his family, like literally going back something like 7 generations. Like every firstborn male has like the initials DG, right? So he's Dan Good. His father was Donald. His grandfather is Donald. Like I'm literally going back a bunch of like 7 generations, and they have like really old stuff in their house, even with the monograms of them of DG. So he was like, hey, it's kind of a cool tradition. Would you be okay if we continued it? And I was like, yeah, I don't really have a problem with that. I was never married to sort of like any boy names. And then while I was pregnant, we were binge watching Supernatural because I couldn't really do much. And I was like, what would be a really nice name? Dean. So Dean made the list and then sort of like, never came off the list. So it was more like inspired by, but not specifically named after Dean from Supernatural.
As a TV guy myself, I've never quite gotten into Supernatural, but maybe one day. We have a card here of Dan, who you just mentioned. However, not one of your 3 cards. Was it a tough cut there to go with Mr. Jensen Ackles instead of this card of you and Dan?
Figured I already had one custom card. But I had the memories of the first card he gave me of Derek Jeter. So yeah, it was a tough decision. I was deciding like, oh, should I go with another family card? But I went with Supernatural instead. I hope he doesn't watch this.
Yeah, I'm sure Dan will be able to handle it, especially since Supernatural did give you the name of your son. Here are your 3 desert island cards. We've got 2 guys making headlines in the hobby recently, and these cards might end up on someone's desert island in the future. The first being Logan Paul, who decided to wear a rare card around his neck at the Floyd Mayweather fight, and then Erling Haaland, who made headlines because of the massive price someone was willing to pay for his card.
Logan, Golden TV from Ion, South Florida. What's that around your necklace? What is that? Is that Pokemon?
This is a Pokemon card. It's a BGS 10 Charizard, first edition Charizard.
Estimated value?
It's one of 3 in the world. It is my prized possession. Ever since I got this graded a 10, the momentum in my life has been crazy. This is my good luck charm. This is my prized possession. This is $1 million card, baby. Like this is the card that I walked out with to the Floyd Mayweather fight. This is $1 million card.
Forceful run from him. Can he get in there? Oh, you bet he can. That is Erling Haaland all over. Haaland on that left foot. 2! What about that? Oh, stupendous strike. That nearly took...
So with Logan and Erling making headlines within the hobby, I thought, how many people on the streets of New York City would just recognize these guys from a photo? So I took to the streets with a shot of Logan and a shot of Erling and found out how many people would recognize these two making waves within the hobby. Here we go with a shot of Jaeger.
Let's find some people who look like they may recognize one of these guys, if not both of these guys. Let's see what happens.
Do you know who this is? Do you know who this person is?
He's a soccer player.
Oh, okay. Do you know his name by chance?
Not at all.
Okay.
I only know Beckham.
Yellow jersey?
Absolutely not, no.
No.
I don't, but he looks like he's good.
Okay.
Evan?
Oh, you said Evan because his shirt kind of says Evan.
Is this the Danish player that just collapsed on the field?
It is not.
Okay.
Do you know this guy's name?
Yeah, Erling Haaland.
You know it?
Yeah. His
Okay.
dad was Alfingi Haaland, used to play with Leeds.
Wow.
He is from Norway.
Okay.
There's Borussia Dortmund.
Look at this.
Hopefully soon to be Man
Oh
United.
my God. This might be a little easier for you guys. Do you know who this is?
Paul Logan. Hulk Hogan. Paul.
You got it?
Is he the guy who just fought, what's his face, who just fought Mayweather?
Yeah, that's correct. Do you know
Logan
his name?
Paul.
That is his name.
Is it bad that I know him but not
You
the
do
other
know
dude?
his name. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know who he is?
Ryan Gosling's less attractive cousin.
Not Jake Paul, what's his name?
Logan Paul.
Logan Paul, correct.
It's not Aaron Paul, is it? No.
No, but very close.
The YouTuber that has now gotten into boxing.
Yes, correct. He's more of a YouTube sensation.
Oh, I'm not on YouTube.
Yeah. Do you know anyone who's on YouTube?
No.
No. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you.
Sounds about right. Thank you. So this got us thinking, Susan, with major moments happening in the hobby all the time. Which ones of these moments are permanent and will have a lasting impact on the value of some of these items, and which are temporary? So we started thinking permanent or temporary in the terms of tattoos. We've got these two images here, Suze, and we'd love to know if you had to get one tattooed on you permanent for life, and the other one you could just get temporary, which one of these would you choose to be permanent or temporary?
So is it the picture of the actual card or is it just like his face?
That's a good question. We're going to go Logan Paul himself wearing the card, and then the other image would be the card itself here, graded, the whole shebang.
All right. I think for temporary, I would go with Logan Paul, and permanent, the card of Haaland. I feel like with the Haaland, since it seems like he is not as big yet, if people are like, hey, this is a really interesting tattoo, I could like play it off and be like, yeah, this is my brother or like my cousin. Or I could just tell like random stories to people and see which one actually fits the best.
I love that. So we're going to go, for now, we're going to go temporary, Mr. Logan Paul, but you got the big spot on the arm there, right on the bicep. So although it's temporary, people can see that from about a mile away. And there on your forearm there is Erling Haaland, who, of course, as you said, could always be a brother or a relative. But looking good there in that Rosie the Riveter pose there. And I think you might want to consider both of those as permanents. That looks pretty damn good.
I'm getting a little convinced. I'm not going to lie. This is, it's a definite like conversation starter.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, we could start a rage here with Logan Paul arm tattoos, and then who knows? Maybe those will be worth $1 million someday. Talking about these permanent or temporary sort of trends or the headlines and what ends up being a permanent, lasting effect on the hobby and what ends up kind of just being a flash in the pan or something that people are talking about for a little bit. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on the hobby boom recently and some of the things you think are going to be lasting and some of the things that might just be kind of temporary.
Yeah. When I think about this, and believe me, I spend more time thinking about this than I probably would care to admit, but I go back to when I worked at Topps and I worked in marketing. And whenever anybody would ask me, like, what's your job? And I would say, my job is to make people love cards as much as I do. Because I do. I love cards. And I feel like we've been seeing this sort of trend of people coming back into the hobby for several years now, which, you know, I can attest to having my previous jobs. The pandemic certainly, while people were locked down, sort of escalated, you know, this like sort of boom. I think what's here to stay is I think there's more people who've entered the hobby and they're not going away. There's going to be people who've entered and, you know, it's not for them and they'll leave, which is fine. That happens with any hobby. Other things I think that's not going away. I think if card companies sort of don't increase production, I do think wax will still be a little bit more difficult to find than previously because, you know, for places like Target and Walmart, a lot of people, it's their only outlet to buy trading cards and, you know, they don't have a local hobby shop. So I do think that, you know, when eventually they show back up at Target, these products, they're still going to be difficult to find. I don't think you're going to have the sort of Black Friday rush every single week that you've been seeing. I think that will slow down, but I do think that wax might still be a little difficult to obtain.
Yeah, is there a sweet spot between things being too easy to find and too hard to find? You know, so many people have probably gotten into the hobby and maybe just for fun, you know, kind of getting, I don't want to say priced out, but sort of experienced out in the sense that they show up to a Target, they show up to Walmart, there's nothing there. What's that sweet spot between, hey, there's still a potential that you find something super rare that not everybody has, and something that somebody can start tomorrow and still have some fun if they walk out their front door?
Yeah, no, there is, and I wish there was a good answer. The problem is I don't even think the card companies or like card companies within the hobby know that answer. But one thing that I have felt very good about is that I do believe, having experienced it and listened to companies, including Golden Auctions and Topps and, you know, other people I know within the hobby, that these companies take it seriously. Like, it's easy to be like, to boo on these companies, but, you know, this goes back to what we talked about earlier. Like, I have this experience and I get to see a bigger picture, and I do actually have opportunities to talk to maybe people other collectors probably don't. But companies take their role within the hobby pretty seriously, and that they know that, like, okay, we can't overprint because we know what happened back in, you know, the 80s and 90s when there was just a glut of product. But you don't want to underprint either, because then what happens to those people who can never find cards? Like, you push them out. So I know they take that responsibility really seriously to make sure that they're also doing right by our hobby and by this industry.
How much does what happens on the court in the game affect the value or the trends when it comes to the hobby and the cards? We're right in the middle of the NBA playoffs, the NHL playoffs. You got MLB regular season going on. Kevin Durant just had a massive game yesterday. In your experience, how much does that cause a ripple effect through the hobby when it comes to his items?
You know, I think you see them sort of those kinds of games when those big things happen. Those like there are immediate changes because, like, okay, KD has a huge game, you'll see then people are flooding to, like, you know, online to like eBay or to Golden or to other like places that sell cards and buying their cards because, like, that excitement, that there's that sort of like FOMO, you know, like you don't want to miss out on these cards. And it's not just KD, you'll see that with like other players. I mean, I'm not immune to it. I try to hold off, but the WNBA season started, and in New York Liberty, like, they were off to this hot start, and Sabrina Ionescu hits, like, you know, a 3-pointer to win it at the buzzer, and she has like a triple-double. I was like, I need her card, and I bought it. I'm sure it was probably a little bit cheaper right now than if I didn't buy it like 2-3 weeks ago.
Yeah, I've been going through the same thing, looking at Brooklyn, going through the playoffs. I'm like, I think I need some Steve Nash in my life. What was the last card that you bought, if you remember?
I'm looking because I probably have it sitting next to me on my desk. So I don't have it next. I actually know where it is. It was a 1992 Fleer Pro Cards Derek Jeter, just a minor league card that I'm trying to complete the 92 to 96 run, and of the 1992 cards of things that are affordable in my price range, that was the last card I needed. So exciting.
And if you mentioned it before, but how many Jeter cards do you have again? And is that the person who you have the most cards of in your collection?
Yeah, I'm a like a player collector. I don't collect sets or like specifically teams. I mostly like buy cards of players I like. But yeah, Derek Jeter is my like ultimate PC, which I'm still logging and still tracking, but at this point I estimate to have over 2,500 unique, that's not counting doubles, cards of Derek Jeter.
2,500 unique Derek Jeter cards. That's amazing. Let's get some final thoughts from you for our wild card here. What are you most excited about? It could be big picture, it could be broad stuff. Just, what excites you the most right now when it comes to the hobby?
I'm excited for the National. Last year it got canceled, and this year the National Sports Collectors Convention is back, and I'm really excited for that because, it's a long 5 days, especially if you go for the whole thing, but the great part about it is you get to see people that you really only get to see once a year. And, here you are with all these sort of people who are there because they all love the same thing. They all love cards and memorabilia. So it's really exciting to be at the National around all those people.
You mentioned earlier about how the pandemic might have gotten a lot of new people into the hobby, and the pandemic hopefully obviously will be something in the rear view. But talking about the relationships there, and along the way, meeting people, finding out people have the same passions as you, and the relationships you make along the way, is that something that'll probably keep these people around? Because as you said, now there's conventions you can go to meet these people. There are new bonds you formed with people online. Talk about how that is sort of the secret sauce when it comes to this hobby and keeping people around for a lifetime.
I agree with that 100%. Like, relationships is what makes this hobby keep going. Yes, cards and crazy expensive cards and cards that are gonna buy me a new car or put my kid through college. That's great. It's wonderful. I'm not gonna lie, but it's the relationships that you make that keep it going, that fuel this hobby. Like, my husband is a giant card collector. That's something we get to like share in and talk about it. It's really wonderful that I'm like, did you see this crazy card? And we could talk about those crazy prices, and we could talk about new cards I've learned about, which generally I'm like, did you know about this? He's like, yeah. So it's like, these are fun things we talk about. My best friend, the one I created a cardboard problem with, she's a collector. We get to go on like card trips, and like before kids and husbands, we would literally oh, let's go on a road trip today and go find a card shop we've never been to before. So it's those relationships that literally 20 years later, we're still friends, that through cards we forge this fantastic friendship. And I think there's a lot of people who have found that, especially on social media, because you couldn't get out. But now you have tons of Facebook groups. You have Twitter. Instagram is blown up with hobby content. TikTok has hobby content. And I think these people have really found sort of a new family of card collecting.
Yeah, and those relationships and those personalities, that's sort of what we're trying to explore here every week on Inside the Hobby. And just want to remind everybody, we will be back every week with a guest to share their experience and talk about some of the relationships they've made along the way. I want to remind everybody to check out Golden's June premium auction at goldenauctions.com. Suze, of course, played a big part in a lot of the stuff you're going to read over there. We want to thank Suze for joining us. Thank you so much for telling us all about this stuff and that massive Jeter collection, those adorable cards you shared that you would bring on the island with you today.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed myself, and I cannot wait to see who comes on next.
Once again, we want to thank Suze for joining us here, being our first ever guest here on Inside the Hobby. Reminder to go and check out Golden's June premium auction at goldenauctions.com. It wraps up next weekend, June 26th and 27th. I'm your host, Scott Yeager, and I want to thank you for joining us. Next week, we will have a brand new guest with me here to take you all inside the hobby.